Hi, Alan. Nice to have you on
Nice to be on.
Yeah, and today is the next part of our series. We're talking about how to do voice of customer research, including we'll talk about the questions and really get into detail about the process too. So, with that said, I think I will let you just begin to talk on how do we approach, the qualitative and quantitative aspects of research in general.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I'm going to first talk about the difference between quantitative and qualitative research.
Yeah.
And all these are buckets of voice of the customer. If I take a step back, voice of the customer can be a lot of things. It can be talking to customers. It can be having ethnographic studies where you follow the user around. It could be filling surveys out. It could be filling scores out. It could be looking at chat room conversations you've had with customers. But I'm going to kind of talk about the ones that are used most. And I'm going to compare a lot of this between surveys and true customer discussions. Now, they're both very important. In my mind, open-ended discussions can develop rich insights. Surveys can, in a cost-effective way, validate those insights. The other point I want to make is, in my mind, there's a difference between B2B and B2C, business to business and business to consumer. Business to business, I would almost always start with qualitative. I would start with qualitative with my key 80-20 customers, the 20% of my customers that are 80% of my sales, and talk to different stakeholders there. Then get that information back, find out what does it mean, and then you can tap into the non-key customers, both with some insights as well as using surveys to validate your hypothesis. So for example, if you have 100 accounts, 20 of them are probably 80% of your revenue. And then there may be 3 key stakeholders at each account. So if you do the math, if my brain's working this morning, 20 times 3 is 60, you'll do 60 interviews. And you'll come away with just a ton of rich insights. The B2C example, in my mind, is different. You have millions of people buying bleach, millions of people buying toothpaste, deodorant, consumer goods. You can't start going out and doing qualitative. You have to do the quantitative to look at the crosstabs of where's the opportunity or where's the threat. And then once you've identified that, then you can do an overlay, which a lot of the consumer research companies don't do. They kind of stick with the point of sale data and all that. But you can do some ethnography, you can do some focus groups, and you can kind of go from there. But that's not the type of research we do. We strictly do the business to business. So when you're doing customer discussions, I think the best data you can get is either when you're in front of the customer face to face, or at least have an in-depth phone call. And our phone calls last about 25 to 35 minutes. Get a lot of data. It's a discussion. The other point I want to contrast here, maybe keep me on track, but the other point is surveys, you get like a 4% response rate. If you're lucky, maybe a 10%. When you have the client do the work for you, you get a very high percent response rate. For example, we get between an 80 and 82% response rate. We have them send out the emails requesting. If they don't answer us in 3 calls, we get the client to go chase them down. We set up a time, we do the interview, and I can get into all that later. But that's and what we pride ourselves in is having a discussion. It's almost like we're face to face. And what's, again, I go back, is what's different than surveys. Surveys is, are you satisfied? How would you rate us? All that. We ask a lot of open-ended questions, and I've sent Shaitan a list of like 11 questions we use all the time, and he can send out for those of you that want it. I assume just mention in the comments. But things like, how are we to do business with in the last 18 months? What do we do well? Where do we need to work on? How easy are we to do business with? How do we treat you? What can we do to be a partner? And so there's all these questions, and you look at that like, well, how do you tabulate that? And that's a complicated issue. It takes some experience to understand how to put these in buckets. There is software out. See, there is software out there that will analyze your qualitative data. But what I found is they don't create the right buckets. I'll give you an example. So an answer could be, what do you like? Well, they get back to us quickly. And so the software says, get back quickly. That's not the bucket. The bucket is the responsive. So unless the respondent says they're responsive, it doesn't fall out of that bucket. So by having a conversation, by developing your skills as an interviewer, you listen, you probe, you understand, you empathize with the customer, you can get some really great things. They could be irritants, they could be opportunities, and then you design initiatives against that, so that you start addressing their issues. And what happens is, first of all, they recognize they're being listened to. They see you taking actions, and they, what's the reason for the 82% response rate, you ask? They want to see you succeed because they want to make their own lives easier. They want you to marshal your resources to address their metrics and objectives. And if this is a mechanism for doing it. So if you're just going to go out and do a bunch of surveys and not do anything with the data, I would be heretical and say, stop doing it. Because instead of creating customer satisfaction, you are actually creating customer dissatisfaction. You're going to make a potential brand advocate into a brand assassin. So I can walk through our process, but maybe this is a good point for you to ask questions or direct me somewhere.
Yeah, I am wondering what makes a good question and what makes a good set of questions. So if I'm going to elaborate on that a bit, like in terms of what makes a good question, like how are they formulated in a way that will lead to the customer speaking, and then what makes a good set of questions is in what bases are you looking to cover, and how do you know that you've
wow, okay, so you don't ask for much, do you?
Never.
Let me take your second question. What basis to cover? You have to, from meeting with the client, understand their key objectives. And we'll actually have a half-day meeting with the client's team. It's like, what do you want out of this research? How are you going to use it? And list all the questions that they come up with, and then we rate them 1, 2, or 3. 1 is critical. 2 is be nice to have. 3 is only if you have time to get. Because what you're really working under is a time frame. You can't ask these people for an hour and a half of their time. So, I call it peanut butter research. You can either go deep or you can go broad. And it's, so that's the first part. Second part is...
I think just quickly I might use that as the name of the of the podcast or the business.
Peanut butter research. Are
Let's just take a
you
mistake
for it
in
or
there.
against it? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've actually used that in a few of my posts. The other thing that we do is we look at what segment do you want this from? Is it like a random study, or is this a particular industry segment? Who are the titles or functions that we need to talk to? And then we take the final list of questions, the final ones that had the one, and we draw who's the best stakeholder to give us information on this. So if it's pricing, it's probably purchasing. If it is working with current engineering processes, probably engineer. If it's something marketing, it's probably someone in marketing. So we draw these arrows, and then what we have is a separate questionnaire for purchasing, a separate one for engineering, a separate one for whatever. Does that answer the second one?
Yeah. So you
Okay.
look at you go
So
to the client, you look for the
the
objectives.
first one,
you go
before I
step by-
forget,
Yeah.
so you have to put these in logical order. You have to use a lot of open-ended questions. You can have some rankings and ratings, but it's got to be primarily open-ended.
Right.
It should go from macro to micro.
Okay. Interesting.
It should, I mean, for example, and you shouldn't ask threatening questions at the beginning of the questionnaire.
Okay.
So I've trained people and they say, well, I want to know what their margin is. Okay, but ask it later. You haven't built up a rapport yet. There's a lot of thought in this, and I've been doing this for 40 plus years. It still will take me a couple days to think about and lay out the discussion questions I have, and I'll come up with like 25 or 30, no more. And then it's like, so there's some open-ended stuff. For example, how are we to do business with over the last 12 or 18 months? Why are you asking that question, Alan? Well, one, it's an icebreaker, but two, it kind of signifies where the conversation's going. Do they like you? Do they not like you? Some of these conversations, you like the peanut butter phrase, I feel like a priest, because they confess all their sins that the client's doing, and my job is to go back. And I've had people say, God, I feel so much more relieved. And I'll say, well, I'm glad you do. Now that makes our job a little harder because we got to go back and get them to stop these evil ways. So it's part art, it's part science, it's part experience. I will say when you start out and you do your own, you will get better over time. You're afraid in the beginning. It's like, I've never done this. I don't know what's going to happen. But the client will appreciate you taking the time. You will get better. You can be trained by outside people too. I mean, so I'll let you have more questions and I'll bounce into our process, but I don't know if this is valuable or not, but I'm just kind of speaking from the hip here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the second question, one is a good set of questions. That's dependent on the client, what they want.
Well, yes and no. I mean, if it's a new product assignment, there's going to be a lot of questions on how they use their current product, how unhappy they are. But there's always questions like, what are the things that we do well? What are the things we need to work on? How easy are we to do business? Independent of it being product, you get a lot of information there.
Yeah.
And it's like, are we a partner or are we just a supplier? What can we do to be a partner? So I would say I have like modules, not nodules, modules. But it does depend on what they're doing. We have done Net Promoter Score studies, but it's not just getting the NPS score. We still go into all these other topics. How good is the rep? How's our product quality? How do we rate to the competition? So what I found, though, is if you're a beginner, you're going to complicate this. You're going to fall all over your feet. Start the process. I'll say you like the peanut butter one, but I have another one that I use is crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
Don't go out and think you can boil the whole ocean and your first interview you're going to get everything. It's a process, but at least you start getting comfortable. And so that's why I'm going to put a little plug in. I think the best framework for this is to have the client do some interviews, hire a good research firm, have them do some interviews, have them bring you with on a few interviews, have them help train you, and eventually they're going to train you in their knowledge so that you are more comfortable, you know how to use probes, you know how to use silence. And I'll just say at one firm, I trained everyone, and we did a lot of role playing. We had other consultants be on the other line of the phone, and I would say, well, just be very difficult today, no matter what you So it's like we would put it hard, or like, can you add up to 100 points? And they add up to 120. It's like, okay, now you need to go back and tell them, how do you get to 100? Where do I take the points from? But it's experience, and it's not like people think, oh, you want to interview 20 accounts. Well, that's just 20 phone calls, right? It's not 20 phone calls. It could probably be 40 phone calls because people aren't there. You leave a message. You'll set up a time to talk to these people, and like a quarter of them still won't show, and you got to go get them back again and reschedule. So it's so I some of my colleagues, they're kind of purists, only hire a research firm. And it's like, I can see going out and doing some on your own is good. You get some information is good. And it gets you over this fear factor, this FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Would I be right in thinking, like, as a general framework for this, you could think of it as you want to ask questions, from what you're saying, you want to ask questions about how the customer perceives competition, how they perceive engaging with your company, and how they and then their own needs, wants, pain points. So these are the three things you're trying to.
Yes, and maybe. Yes is you want to understand how you're doing vis-a-vis your competitors. And a lot of times we will say, okay, rate the client's product. I'm making this up here, but rate the client's quality, product quality. Oh, it's a 7. How does that compare to the competition? Oh, they're always a 9. What are we doing that they're not that they're not doing? But some of the issues, you have to be careful because you only have 30 minutes on the phone with them. They're not going to spend hours. And if it's a branding study, you want to ask, okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your client? What are the strengths and weaknesses of company X, a company Y, a company Z? When you think of a product category, what brands come to mind and why? So there's certain questions that you can flesh out more depending on the topic. But go back, if it's a new product study, you may not ask questions about the brand. I mean, and again, correct. I know I've said this before, but it's a process. It's not like you do one set of research and you're done. It should be a continual process.
Yeah, of course. I'm wondering also so from these conversations, you'll end up with a lot of data. Now, how is this data recorded, and then how is this data then processed?
Okay. Let's do a couple of different examples.
Yeah.
I've done some work in the business consumer world, specifically in senior housing communities.
Yeah.
And there you can record them, You can send them out for transcripts, and then send the transcripts back to your company, and you can, you're going through the transcripts and picking key relevant information. The problem in B2B is that when you say, I'd like you to talk about your strategic issues with our client, and I'd like to record you, they either will say no because they're afraid it gets back to the rep, or they just don't want to talk about all this stuff. So what we do, and I've learned this from several companies, so we'll have a 30-minute conversation. And we hang up the phone after saying thank you. We hang up the phone, and then we write a detailed transcript, because we're always taking notes through this process. Keywords, not sentences, keywords. And we write it up so it gets it in our mind. We send the transcripts to the client. We also take the information, and this is where people are going to go nuts here, but we put it in a spreadsheet. The qualitative, the quantitative, on questions we have to code the responses for, we'll put it on a separate tab. And then we kind of look at these and we develop a PowerPoint presentation using words, using the data. And it's an intensive process, but it also allows you to get into thinking mode on this. It's like, okay, this is what they say. What do they mean? What can a client do with it? And that's why I know some of my colleagues, and they want to use like an AI system or let's count the qualitative a certain way. I like to actually dive in it myself and figure out, okay, what are they saying? How come this statement is different from this other guy's statement? And then so I read the spreadsheet down, and then I read it across. Here's a 45-year-old mechanical engineer. He doesn't believe in anything that's not CD-ROM or internet based, and here's why. And here's a 60-year-old engineer that's working in municipal engineering. He only wants hard copy data, right? And you're not going to generally change these people. So it's a process. And then I'll just say this, and I'll let you direct me again. The whole thing of this, the whole idea here, is to understand what are the key issues, what are the top 3 key issues, what are the top 3 key issues that are root causes, are under the client's control, and then what do you recommend the client to address these based on experience in this project, in this industry, and other industries? I don't think I answered your question at all, did I?
I reckon you did. I was following along. What was my question at that point? It was about how you process the data. I think
yeah,
that was answered,
and so if you think it's a good time, I'll jump into the process from beginning to end.
I'd actually like you to begin that by explaining like what it is that you ask, how it is you present this research to the clients, right? Because are you saying, hey, we're going to do something great, so we're doing something great with like your input? How are you framing this?
Who's the they? The client?
The person you're interviewing, yeah.
Oh, the person I'm interviewing.
Yeah.
Well, it's really simple. So first, the client sends out an email.
Yeah.
Because you're asking. Okay, I thought you were asking something else. But so sends out an email. Can you cooperate? We've hired a third party. Please be frank and honest. And so from our firm will call and set up appointments.
Yeah.
I will call and say I'm calling on behalf of the XY client. They sent you an email. Did you get it? If not, you have them resend it again. The whole purpose of this is not to just get information. It's actually to get clients to do actions that help the customer better. So they can be less painful to deal with. They can design new innovative products if that's what they want. So it's really to understand the key things. And then I said earlier, it's a process, not a point in time. So what we like to do, jumping far ahead, is let the client roll it out, and in 18 months go back and interview and see if they've made any progress on these issues. But the carrot for the interviewee is, okay, so, a couple things. Someone's going to listen to me. Listen time. That's important. I'm recognized as being of value, and they're going to fix some crap that their client has been doing to me for years, right? And I'm just, you can clean that up, but the carrot is they will be better served. And the interesting point is a corollary to that. In B2C, you always have to give honorariums. Whether it's a focus group or on the phone or survey, you're in for a drawing, whatever. In B2B, you seldom have to do that. You seldom have to give honorariums. One exception. And the exception is when you're in the C-suite level, they demand to be paid. And they demand to be paid via donating to a charity. And they want their name on the charity. But other than that, you don't have to get into sending out checks and this and that. And, So again, if the client does their job, their customer is happier. They start the process to become a raving fan.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Okay, got it. So now with that, I'll let you explain more about your process.
I've said some of this, but I'll just kind of lay it out. So the first thing, you understand what the client's trying to do, how they're going to use the research, what their internal paradigms are, because those are usually not right. So we develop a discussion guide after spending a couple days and 40 plus years experience understanding what probably would work. We send it back to the client. Does this address all your issues? Or do we miss anything? Are we not saying something right? And they might add a couple questions. Occasionally they'll try to add 10 and you slap their hand nicely. But no, we can't stay on for 2 hours on this. And then what we do is the first 3 to 5 interviews. Right. Is it working? Are we getting the answers we thought we would need? And then again, as I said earlier, we write up the transcripts. We send them back to the client. What do you guys think? Or do we need to spend more time in different areas? Is this valuable? Are there things that we're missing? Because sometimes, let's say a new product, there's something that, we are not engineers, and I am not about to get an engineering degree at this stage of life. But, okay, if we've missed something, explain it to us and do that. Sometimes we have the client listen to interviews that we do. It gets a little hairy because the client's time is not necessarily the time available for the customer, but occasionally. So there's a comfort level there. Then we do the interviews. We might have a interim presentation that we say, okay, here's where we are in general. We're halfway through, 60% of the way through. Here's what we're finding. It might change, but it kind of tells them, what the track is going to be towards the final. Then we finish the interviews. We develop a PowerPoint. We present to the client top management. We might present to the organization as a whole, being that we're the third party that did the research, and they can ask questions. Yeah. We also, I mentioned these things of the write-ups, the transcripts. And we also have the client give those to the sales force. And then what the client does is maybe 3 months after the project's completed, goes back to each person, each customer, and says, okay, here's what we heard. Are we right? Do you want to change anything or add anything? Okay, great. Here's what we're going to do. And we are going to meet every quarter and see how we are doing in performing what we promised to say. And so what you have is like a closed loop system that the interviewee sees what you're doing with the data. The client understands how you got to those final recommendations and summary. And then, as I said, you wait maybe 12 to 18 months and interview again and say, okay, have they made any progress? And I'll give you an interesting example. I don't want to mention the client's name. It was from France, but we did some research on net promoter scores and other things, and the CEO of the client said, I'm going to tie, which he never should have done, but I'm going to tie your bonus to the net promoter score.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, but we're good enough that we know we weren't getting snowed under, and we would interview. So we did it year one. We did it year two and noticed that the scores had not changed at all. At all.
Oh, wow.
And the CEO got very, I'll use a better word, upset, and said, why are we doing this? We're not getting any benefit. So the third year, you didn't get bonuses the second year. We're going to do this one more year. I'll double your bonuses if we achieve year three. And then we went in year three, and there was a big change. Because talk is cheap. It's actions that count. Yeah. And so the thing is, when you do this, if you don't create actions and you just keep interviewing customers or getting their data or getting their scores, they become dissatisfied over time. It's like, why should I do this? Nothing changes. You just waste my time. I'm kind of paraphrasing a bunch of stuff I've heard.
So why did it? So in that third year, what had changed? Is it that
what had changed was the managers wanted their bonuses.
Okay,
that's what changed. Either get this to go right, or you're going to miss your bonuses. Not only the second year, third year, and you won't get them back. And so that's what. So when you go in and do what I'll call a actionable research study, you've got to get commitment from the top management that we're going to do something with the data. And I've had a couple cases where, well, we'd like you to do some customer satisfaction. What are you going to do with it? And they don't really say, and then you see the binders of studies they've got behind in their desk. This is when there was more feet on the street thing. And it's like, well, if you're not going to use it, why are you doing it? And it's either a check that you can tell the CEO you did it, a vanity metric for the CEO, but we just want to get involved because there are research firms that are cheaper, but we just want to get involved where we can add value. So when you look at the price of our research, it's not price per interview or price for other research firms. It's here's what I paid, here's what I got back. And I'm going to say McKinsey, and in no way am I comparing ourselves to McKinsey. But they'll go in and they'll charge $2 or $3 million for a study.
Yeah.
Maybe more. But they can come out with cost savings of $10 million. So that value proposition kind of works for them, and they're viewed as credible. So it's a process. We want to go back. A lot of times we'll go in and we'll do research for one group, and let's say we want to do some customer satisfaction. Another group will say, well, we're introducing a new product. Can you help us understand what they want? Or we're going into a new market. I don't know where you want to move from there, but
No, no, no. So I think just to summarize where we've come to, we've spoken about why you did this research. We've spoken about what it looks like in B2B. We've spoken about, the objectives you'd set for this, where they comes from, there's a few things including talking to the stakeholders, the types of questions you would ask, what makes a good question, what makes a good set of questions. And now we've gone into quite some depth into the process of this, and how you create some sort, a closed loop system whereby you can actually show the impact of this research to the company and to the client and to the the users, which is the most important thing. So in my mind, actually, we've told the story of how you do VOC research. I don't know if there's anything that if you imagine you're talking to somebody who's wanting to get involved, if there's anything you'd want to tell them. If there was one thing, it would be, how do you phrase a good question?
You don't bias it. You try to make it open-ended. You don't assume anything. There's a logical flow that experienced people, such as me, I'm either old or experienced or senior, take your pick, that knows what works and what doesn't work. So if you're talking about products and product quality, and you don't have a segue between that and how the rep is doing, it's gonna shock them on the phone. It's like, okay, quality's okay. Now how about the rep? How's the rep doing? What are they doing well? It's like, well, why are you asking me? But it's like, okay, we'd like to understand how we are in servicing you, what we can do better. We'd like to talk about, the rep, customer service, these different departments. So I go back, it's a skill, it's an art, and it's experience. And go ahead.
How much do you preface each question with context? So do you say like, oh, we're aware that you're...
So what a typical example, and when we're done, I'm going to give you an example of the research we did. But a typical discussion guide might have 25 to 30 questions. And there might be like 3 or 4 categories of questions. So you transition between the categories, not between questions. Because if you had 25 transitions, you're out of time. And no one wants to listen to that. There are some people on LinkedIn that I have found that are actually really good at this. I don't know if you want me to mention them or not mention them.
Yeah, if you're happy to, I'm happy
to. Ryan Paul Gibson has done this a lot, and he actually has published a book of questions that he uses. And
oh, really? Wow.
Hannah, HANNAHSHIMJ, I believe. She was a psychiatrist before she went into research. So she understands some things. But, I think the bottom line out of this is, if you're going to hire people that do this, hire people that are experienced. And that doesn't mean hire B2B research firms that send out surveys to do actual customer interviews, right? Yeah. And I would say, and vice versa. Don't give someone that does customer interviews surveys to send out, because they're not going to be cost effective. So you will get better over time. I look back at some of my early interviews, like, how could I be such an idiot and say this? But it works, and they take pity. If you'd like, I can move into an example, or so.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I've signed an NDA, and I'm just not sure how long these things are good for. So I'll just give you the example without the client. But a client was making laboratory equipment.
Okay.
And they were working on the next generation equipment. This is going to be the best. It's going to be a killer app, going to take the market. Where have you heard that before, right? And they had like 6 or 8 engineers working in their R&D department with no guidance from marketing. for about 4 to 6 months. So I don't know how many thousands of hours that was, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They couldn't get it out of the lab.
Right.
So what they had was about 40 different features they were designing into this thing. And our first cut was, Jesus, it's going to be very complicated. But we said, okay, we can't interview 20 different features or 40 different features. Narrow it down to 25 and we'll deal with 25. And so we tested the 25 in the market, both in interviews and some surveys. Which ones are valuable? Which ones are not valuable? So, and I'm making this up because I forgot the exact numbers, but out of the 25, there were like 8 of them that were valid.
Yeah.
There were 2 of them were so important they'd pay extra for. What is that? 10, 15 they didn't care for at all. All you're doing is complicating the product and making it too expensive. And they forgot one key feature that the market wanted or wouldn't buy it.
Wow. Okay.
So we went back to them. We said, we've got good news and bad news. The good news is here's the features they want. The bad news is here's what they don't want. I think we call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the ugly is they've got one that you don't have in here. And they what? And so we got them with the general manager's push to redesign the product.
Oh, wow.
Got it out of the lab in 3 months because they had most of it. They just had to take certain features out. Had a prototype. We had them send a couple prototypes as beta users to a couple key personnel outside. They made some comments. No big deal. It was great. And then they launched the product.
Yeah.
So they went from a complete paralysis to entering the market and gaining market share. And as it turns out, they launched maybe 6 months before a Chinese company launched their own. So they were going to get their sales cannibalized by a Chinese company, but instead, fortunately, they cannibalized more of their own than this other company. So
That's better.
but it's you ask what research is good for at one point in one of our talks, and it's like there's a lot of things, but I think if you push me to the wall, research helps you maximize the opportunity for being successful and minimize the potential for failure. And good research should be actionable. It shouldn't just be, here's scores or here's this. Okay, so if you get stuff like going back to the product quality example, ours is a 7 and the competitors is a 9. It's nice to know, but what do you do about it? So it's your job on the interview, not guess what makes them a 9. What can we do to raise our 7 to a 9 or even a 10? And so the user is giving you the information to make this right. And so if you get enough of those points, and you hear that enough, you have your answer. Now, one other thing, you'll hear people saying, all you need is 8 interviews. All you need is 9 interviews.
Right.
And in some cases, they're right. If you're going to do a customer journey analysis, if you're going to do some ethnography and see how some people are using the product, that's probably enough. But if you're going out and looking at customers and what they want, and you tell the CEO it's based on 8 interviews, he will launch you so hard you probably will wind up in the vending machine that sells coffee right out the door. And so at minimum, I say you have to have 20 interviews. And if you're going after major accounts, you have to talk to different stakeholders in each account. So it's not you need 20, you need 2, you need 8. Figure out what you need to be comfortable with. And again, it's not like B2C where you get statistical confidence. I need so many interviews. B2B, again, 20% of your accounts have 80% of your volume. If you make them raving fans, you don't lose them, you gain profitability. And Bain and Company has said for every 5% increase in retention, you get 25 to 95% extra profit. So if you don't care about your customers, at least care about the profit you get from not losing them and making them happy. You should be caring about your customers, but that's a whole different story.
That's fantastic. I think this is a good place for this episode to kind of be wrapped up, and then if I have more questions on the back of this, we can pick them up in another episode. Yeah, I'd like to just listen back to it and really think it through.
So I've given you. I'm very biased and very passionate about treating the customer first, doing research that's actionable. If you can't hear that, I haven't had enough coffee this morning. But I mean, it is the only way to achieve true success. You look at Apple, you look at Nike, you look at Harley Davidson, you look at Southwest Airlines, on and on and on, and how they built their business is delighting the customer, or at least not making it painful. And that is a good model, not the model of we got the customer, now he's going to call on a customer service line, he's going to wait 12 minutes, hear music in the background, and it's like, I don't understand. And I've been preaching one last thing. When you have your major accounts, assign them a specific individual salesperson. Don't let them go into a pool. And give them a separate phone number to call. And damn it, jump on that phone number. Don't just let it just ring in the absence, you know. And it's not how many calls you can do in an hour. It is how have you enhanced the customer experience post sale. But I don't mean to talk so much, but I do.
But I'm enjoying listening. As I mentioned before, this is part of a series, so there will be a next one coming out, and I think we will. Not exactly sure on the topic of that one yet, but it might be customer success. Listening to.
Well, you know, I think that would be an interesting topic because you could wrap post-transaction service, you could wrap net promoter score, the whole CX industry, which is going down the toilet at an amazing speed. And, you know, we could talk about that. But I will take my cues from you. You develop whatever you think is interesting to your listeners. And if I can contribute, I'll contribute. If I can't, I'll tell you I don't have any experience in that type of issue.
Cool. I appreciate that. Well, with all that said, I think wishing you, happy rest of your day.
like some of this series I watch on TV. Until next time.
Until next time, exactly. Until next time, a bit of suspense in that too, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, so I find these conversations actually stimulating and delightful because, go back to your peanut butter example, it's chunky, deep peanut butter. It's not just one smooth layer on bread and you're done. I mean, and people that don't get this deep as potential research vendors are probably not a good vendor to pick. You know, you have to look at a lot of issues, and it's not, you know, again, just not sending out a bunch of random surveys and having AI tabulate the data and, oh, look, we got pretty pies, and, you know, what do we do now? I don't know. So anyway, I'll let you hang up, and then hopefully this was good, and you can cut out any bad parts you want.
I think this one is pretty smooth. I'm not gonna edit anything. Yeah. So
I may have sworn once or twice, so I'm not sure that's good.
I think you self-corrected I think you self-corrected just before that happened. Anyway, I love it, and I also love all the analogies. And we'll be sending out that sheet of questions that I prepared.
Yeah, and again, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list of questions. These are like 11 questions that have worked very well for me over the years. You can sub-select, you can add other questions. Again, just, you know, and I would just, again, go back to your peanut butter. Don't bite off more than you could chew. Don't boil the whole ocean. Start slowly, build a relationship, understand the key issues, and then you can go back for specifics.
So, with that, are you then hosting multiple conversations with these with these users? One is general, and then you go into more and more specific questions.
Yeah, there is, as I said, what we have is modules, some open-ended, how are we to do business with, 4 or 5 questions. And then depending on the topic, then we'll transition into, it could be product, it could be product innovation, it could be what are the key selection factors when you're looking for a new vendor. So it's if your audience is looking for, here's the 20 questions you always ask, it will never be that. But what you have to get your mind in the game and pick questions that work for you. Start slowly, open them up, develop a dialogue, and then slowly kind of get into there. And the issue is always, how can we improve? What should the client do? And again, they can't do everything. So what are the 3 things the client needs to do?
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, thanks. That was like a little tangent that I could have threw out there towards the end. But yeah, thanks, Alan. It's been, been great talking.